I'm Captain James T. Kirk of the Starship Enterprise. What's going on here? Who's in charge?
Nobody's really in charge. Maybe the phase. That's one of the things that makes me so nervous. Nobody's really in charge. I try to take charge of little things like making sure the lights work. I don't like the dark. Are you gonna be in charge now? Maybe you should talk to the phase first.
The phase? What's the phase? Why don't you just tell me what's going on here? If you need help, the Federation has many resources. Would you tell me about this ship? Why are you going to land in a town on Atobus? Why didn't you respond to our hail? The phase? What's the phase?
We contemplate our phase. Some of our people think they're the ones who keep everything going. Sometimes they tell us things to do. They remind some people when to eat. Otherwise they'd forget. I don't forget, but that's because I'm smart. If you want to, you can probably talk to the phase in the oratory. The builders built the oratory. The room there to the south, they built the garden north. If you're hungry or if your head ain't feeling right, there's food and such in the hall. Through there, the west door. The rest hall is through the east door, but you might have to wait for one of the beds. The builders were just so logical. They thought of everything. You can go anywhere.
You know, Jim, I don't think there's much more he can tell us. I can take a tricorder reading on him if you think it's appropriate.
I'm Captain James T. Kirk of the Starship Enterprise. What's going on?
Nobody's really in charge. Maybe the phase.
The phase? What's the... Why don't you just tell me what's going on here? If you need help, the Federation has many resources.
We've been doing fine for 1,000 generations, Captain, maybe more. We're happy here, just waiting for the ship to return to the builders. that's the promised time when we come home. We don't need any help.
Who are the builders? Let's get back to the main subject. Maybe you can tell me about your people.
You know, these other folks can be a little peculiar. You know, a few bricks shy of a load. Not all of us are, but the ones who are really make me nervous. Can't ever be sure how they're going to act. That's why I stay in a room like this most of the time. I'm safe here.
You know, Jim, I don't think there's much more he can tell us. I can take a tricorder reading on him if you think it's appropriate.
I'm Captain James T. Kirk.
Nobody's really in charge.
Faye, would you tell me about this ship? Why are you going to land in a town on Atobus? Why didn't you respond to our hail?
We're going to land? Has the promised time come? I have to think about this. Please don't bother me anymore.
His mental activity is very high, but doesn't seem pathologic, Jim. Respiratory activity indicates a high degree of anxiety by comparison with others of his race. Now, that much stress is unhealthy if this is a chronic state.
Go away! I'm busy. My table must be kept clean.
Slightly undernourished, sluggish pulmonary and circulatory conditioning. Doesn't get nearly enough exercise, I'd say. Brainwave activity uneven. I'd need a battery of tests to be sure. This is a complete new race after all, but he may be suffering from some blood chemistry imbalances likely to be affecting his mind.
Interesting. The plant does not register in the tricorder botany file, but it does suggest similarities to Algolian crocus.
Algolian crocus? Is an Algol 3 the system with the semi-intelligent plant life?
Affirmative, Doctor. There are characteristics of similar developments in this plant, but on a more limited scale. Interesting. The plant does not register in the tricorder's botany file, but it does suggest similarities to a Shasthar tree on the planet Beta 3.
It's beautiful, Mr. Spock.
Interesting. The plant does not register in the tricorder's botany file, but it does suggest similarities to a Nemosinian cactus.
The ones that can shoot thorns at people?
Only 3 varieties of that plant can shoot thorns, Doctor. Nor do I detect that ability from this specimen.
Captain, individuals on this ship appear to be suffering, perhaps from certain mental disorders. Were I to examine them, I might be able to determine something more.
Captain, this place gives me the willies. I feel like I'm on a yellow alert without knowing why.
I find the situation in this room disturbingly irrational at first impression, Captain. I suggest we endeavor to understand what we see around us in order to make a sensible analysis.
We have to find a way to help these people.
I believe this person has reached adulthood physically, Jim. But brain activity scans suggest he may have suffered a failure to mature intellectually. Remember, this is a new race, Captain. While these people are clearly humanoid, I may not have all the answers. This individual is a bit elderly, but not in too bad shape when you take that into account. He seems to be suffering some brain lesions that might be genetically linked, nerve degeneration in the lower back.
This individual appears to be typical of his race, perhaps somewhat elderly. The crown is made of paper, and the silvery rod he holds is wood wrapped with silver tape. The blocks are an unusual organic substance high in compounds of phosphorus, nitrogen, ammonia, and calcium. In this form, the chemicals are inert and make a practical non-toxic toy.
I'm Captain James T. Kirk of the Starship Enterprise. Who are you?
Jacasy.
What can you tell me about this place, Jacasy? Can I play with the blocks, Jacasy? Can you smile for me, Jacasy? Is there something you want, Jacasy? What can you tell me about this place, Jacasy? Can I play with the blocks, Jacasy?
The sweet-faced adult shakes his head no.
Methinks you peasants should know your place, and speak only when royalty speaks first to you.
Captain, the man in that throne-like chair seems to be staring at me. Perhaps I should try to talk to him.
What a noble-looking woman you have my permission to speak. You stand out remarkably, bearing yourself like a queen. Yet these Carls do not treat you as royalty. Surely you have royal blood flowing in your veins?
Bloodlines do not dictate who we listen to. We weigh a person's worth by their actions. My leader here is Captain Kirk, an admirable man. Speak with him. My ancestors ruled in the lands of Kush and Timbuktu. We may speak as peers, you and I. Royalty recognizes royalty, does it not? Look on me and decide for yourself. You will know. Blood, my ancestors ruled.
Oh, I am so glad to find another of royal blood. I am so tired of sitting here all the time, but whenever I leave, thralls and lesser folk plant their fundaments on the great throne, and that's just not acceptable. I know you'll mind the proprieties and not let anyone else sit on the throne. And now, I'll finally be able to go and get some rest.
You manage to untwist a length of wire and a light bar.